Hi Bearcats, and welcome to Chapter 2. So if you're watching this in order, you've already completed Chapter 1, and if you remember, one of the things that we talked about in Chapter 1 was our health-related components to physical fitness, and the first one on there was cardiorespiratory endurance or cardiovascular endurance, and we talked about it being the number one component for long-term health. So what Chapter 2 covers is cardiovascular endurance or cardiorespiratory endurance in much further detail. Now I will say this is not a biology class, so we're not going to go in that much detail, but we are going to cover the cardiorespiratory system a little bit to give you an idea of how the heart functions, why it functions that way, and then also lead into some ways where we can be heart healthy, so to speak. But before we can do that, you have to understand a little bit about the heart, and again, why it functions the way that it does, how it functions, and then from there, like I said, we will talk about what you can do to better your heart health, because again, that's the number one determinant for long-term health is cardiorespiratory cardiovascular endurance. So if you haven't done so, pull up the notes. I'll click over to the PowerPoint section right now and follow along as we cover Chapter 2. All right, guys, now we have the notes section pulled up, the PowerPoint notes. So if you haven't pulled up, you can follow right along with us. You can take some extra notes off to the side or whatever you need to do to make sure you have the information. I will try to touch on some of the test questions or quiz questions that are associated as we go along to make sure that you do have the correct information. So here we go with Chapter 2. Looking at cardiovascular endurance, also called cardiorespiratory endurance, which we talked about. And keep in mind, cardio is just talking about the heart and the heart system, so to speak. And again, many of you guys have probably heard the term of somebody saying, I'm going to go do cardio in reference to exercise. And that is basically just abbreviating or shortening the term, which is actually cardiovascular endurance or cardiorespiratory endurance. So what that does is it describes our energy output. It is the most important component of health-related physical fitness for longevity. So again, we definitely talked about that. And again, just to review on to Chapter 1, but our health-related physical fitness components are cardiorespiratory endurance, body composition, muscular strength, muscular endurance, and flexibility. And keep in mind the most important one out of all those is cardiovascular endurance or cardiorespiratory endurance. So again, make sure that you know that cardiorespiratory endurance is the most important component of all of those health-related physical fitness for longevity. It contributes to greater development or improvement in the other health-related physical fitness components. So what we mean by that is it's also going to have a positive impact on those other health-related physical fitness components. For example, body composition, talking about your body fat percentage. If you embark in a cardiovascular endurance program or you implement some cardiovascular training into your workout program, you're expending more calories, the odds are you're going to reduce your fat mass. If you reduce your fat mass, you're greatly improving your body composition. So by doing cardiovascular endurance activities, you're actually improving your body composition. So doing that cardiovascular endurance will have a positive effect on those other health-related physical fitness components. So that's something to pay attention to and take note of. Cardiovascular endurance is the ability to supply oxygen to working muscles over a period of time. So again, when we talk about health-related physical fitness components, we also talked about muscular endurance. So here you're trying to get your muscles to work for an extended period of time. In order to sustain muscular activity and muscular endurance, you can see that cardiovascular endurance is the key component to that, because in order to sustain muscular endurance, your muscles must have oxygen, and the only way that they're going to receive oxygen is if your cardiovascular system is working properly. So again, that's just another example of how you can see that the cardiovascular endurance also has that positive impact on those other health-related physical fitness components, just like we talked about here with muscular endurance. So talking about the cardiovascular system itself, again, this isn't necessarily a biology class, so we're not going to dive too deep into it, but we will look at some of the basics here. But cardiovascular endurance combines the cardiovascular and respiratory systems into one. So obviously, cardiovascular system, we're talking about the heart. When we look at the respiratory system, now we're talking about some of the lungs and the lung function as you're using that to breathe. That's your respiratory system. The four components of your cardiovascular system in oxygen transport, you have your heart, your blood vessels, your blood, and lungs. So all those work together to transport the oxygen within the blood to the different parts of the body. And then also remove the deoxygenated blood. So the right side of the heart pumps deoxygenated blood to the lungs. The right side of the heart is actually slightly smaller, and you can see that it's only pumping from the heart to the lungs, the deoxygenated blood to the lungs, so it doesn't have to push it very far. So as it contracts, it's simply pushing that deoxygenated blood from the heart to the lungs, which is a very short distance, and that's why the right side of the heart is actually slightly smaller than the left side of the heart. The left side of the heart, you can see, pumps oxygenated blood to all different parts of the body, from the tip of our head to the tip of our toes. In order for anything to work and to function, it has to have oxygen. Every cell within our body to function must have oxygen. So the left side of the heart pumps the oxygenated blood to every part of our body, and that's why the left side of the heart is actually slightly larger in size, because it is a stronger part of the muscle, because as it contracts, it's having to pump blood much further distances. So that's something to take note of as well. And looking at the purposes, it takes in and delivers oxygenated blood to the cells of the body. So just like we talked about, in order for any cell within your body to function, it must have oxygen. So that's one of the purposes of the cardiorespiratory system, is to take in and deliver that oxygenated blood to the different cells of the body. And then obviously it has to remove the deoxygenated blood. Once the different cells of the body have utilized that oxygen within the blood, it now has to take the deoxygenated blood away and other waste products from the body. So again, it's a two-part system where it delivers the oxygenated blood to the different cells within the body so they can perform and work and function, and then it also helps remove that deoxygenated blood and other waste products from those different parts of the body. So it's a cycle, continues working from the pumping of the blood, the oxygenated blood to the body, and then removes the deoxygenated blood away from the body. So the regulation of the cardiorespiratory system. We have cardiorespiratory output, which is the volume of blood pumped per minute. So let me just get all these up here and then we'll go through the notes. So anyway, cardiac output, the volume of blood pumped per minute. The average adult volume at rest, and this is also in your book, but it's 5 liters. So the average adult volume, again, cardiac output, the volume of blood pumped per minute. So at rest, your blood is being pumped, your body is pumping 5 liters of blood per minute. That's what your heart is doing, is pumping 5 liters of blood per minute. As you exercise, obviously that's going to increase. The cells in your body are working harder. They need oxygen, they need more oxygen, and they need it quicker in order to sustain the activity, and in turn also needs to remove that deoxygenated blood to replace it with oxygenated blood. So this is going to have to work a lot faster during exercise. So during exercise, that can actually increase to 20 to 25 liters of blood pumped per minute. So think about that in terms of liters. You guys are probably familiar with a 2-liter bottle of Coke. Well, at rest, your body's pumping about 5 liters per minute, which is 2 to 2.5 of those 2-liter bottles of Coke. But during exercise, it's pumping between 20 and 25 liters. So think about that. You're going to take 10 of those 2-liter bottles of Coke, just to give you an example of how much blood is actually being pumped per minute during exercise. And then we can look at the stroke volume is the amount of blood pumped per beat. So the cardiac output is the volume of blood pumped per minute. The stroke volume is the volume of blood pumped per beat, per individual beat or contraction of the heart is what stroke volume is. Now, cardiac output is what that CO is described there. So here we're looking right here. Okay, so CO, cardiac output, is equal to basically your heart rate times stroke volume. So the amount of cardiac output looks at your heart rate, which is how many times your heart beats per minute, times stroke volume, which is the amount of blood pushed out or pumped per beat. So if you times those two together, that's going to give you a measurable number, which is going to be cardiac output. So again, cardiac output is your heart rate times stroke volume. So again, heart rate is how many beats per minute. Stroke volume is how much blood is being pumped per beat. With improved fitness, cardiac output will increase, stroke volume, and consequently decrease heart rate. So what that means is as you improve your cardiorespiratory endurance and your fitness, your cardiac output is going to increase stroke volume. Again, stroke volume is how much blood is pumped per beat. So if one beat of the heart is now able to pump more blood to your body and then also remove deoxygenated blood from the body, it is not having to beat as many times to supply your body with the needed oxygenated blood. Therefore, you're going to decrease your heart rate. So you are becoming more effective and efficient with using your cardiorespiratory system. So again, your body is pumping out, or I should say your heart is pumping out more blood per beat, therefore it is having to beat less. So it's not having to work as hard. You can even think about it as, the RPMs in your car. If you run your RPMs up real high, it can cause a lot of problems. Well, same thing with your heart rate. If your heart rate's going too high for too long of a period of time. So again, with the improved fitness, your cardiac output is going to increase it's going to increase the stroke volume and decrease heart rate, which is a good thing. And there is a maximum heart rate. So what we're going to look at here is a simple equation that gives us what your estimated heart rate is. So your heart rate max is equal to 220, the number 220 minus your age. So since we're dealing with a lot of the college students here, let's just say the average age of our class is 20 years old. So 220 minus 20 equals 200. Therefore, your maximum heart rate would be 200, is what your maximum heart rate would be. So that just kind of gives you an idea of what your maximum heart rate is. We're going to go ahead and continue on and see kind of how we aim for certain percentages of our maximum heart rate through different exercise to give you a little bit more insight into cardiorespiratory endurance. But that is how you will find your maximum heart rate, is using the formula 220 minus your age. So maximum cardiac output is affected by maximum heart rate. Max heart rate decreases with age. So just like everything else, as we get older, we tend to see a decrease in a lot of our fitness and a lot of our health. Well, your heart rate max does the same thing. So it can beat less times per minute. So again, if we look at that same formula, 220 minus your age gives you your max heart rate. So again, when you're 20 years old, your maximum heart rate would be 200. When you're 30 years old, 220 minus 30 is 190. When you're 40 years old, 220 minus 40 is 180. So you can see you went from 200 beats per minute as your maximum heart rate to 190 to 180, and that continues on as you increase with age. Well, what do you think happens to your cardiac output with age? The same thing. It is going to decrease as you age. So just like everything else decreases as you age, that's one of the reasons why we want to take advantage of being relatively young and healthy now, is so you can improve that while you can. But also note that as you age, your heart rate and your cardiac output will decrease. Blood pressure is also a factor. Blood pressure is the force of blood against your vessel walls. So you can think about it as like a water hose, right? So your water hose is open, it flows freely. Well, what happens is you put your thumb on the end of the water hose and start closing off that flow. It starts adding pressure to that water hose. Well, the same thing happens with your blood against the vessel walls, and that's what blood pressure is. The arterial contraction, or is the contraction pressure, is the systolic pressure. And pressure when the heart relaxes, which is between the beats, is the diastolic pressure. So when we take blood pressure, we actually get two different numbers. We get a systolic and a diastolic number. The systolic is your when it contracts. Your diastolic is when it relaxes. So normal blood pressure is 120 over 80. So 120 would be your systolic pressure. 80 would be your diastolic pressure. So again, there's more pressure on the vessel walls when you are having the contraction, and that is what that 120 number is, and then it reduces down to 80 when your heart relaxes. There's less pressure against the vessel walls. And borderline hypertensive, this is recently just changed. What we've taught up to this point and what was recommended is 140 over 90 was borderline hypertensive. 140 over 90. What we got today through an email stated that it was changing to 130 over 80. 130 over 80. So I will clarify that as we progress through this semester and let you know exactly what is going to be on the exam. But as far as how things were written as of today, normal blood pressure is 120 over 80. Borderline hypertension is 140 over 90. And again, that 120 over 80, 120 would be the systolic pressure, 80 would be the diastolic pressure. So looking at the different energy systems, you have your metabolism. ATP, adenosine triphosphate, is the only energy source that can cause a muscle contraction. That is a molecule of energy, is what adenosine triphosphate is. But O2 is the main ingredient. So you'll see how oxygen plays a tremendous role in all of these different energy systems, or most of these energy systems, I should say. But anyway, ATP-PC system is stored ATP in muscle cells. Oxygen is not utilized or not used during this system. It is very explosive and powerful for short periods of time. So when we talk about our ATP-PC system, we are talking about very powerful 100% effort, as hard as fast as you can do something for about 8 to 12 seconds. Okay, so if we look at running a 100-meter dash, it is as hard and as fast as you can run for 100 meters. Well, what happens after 100 meters? Things start to slow down because you have exhausted your ATP-PC system. So again, you utilize that system for full-on effort, 100% effort, but it only sustains that activity for a short period of time. That's as long as you can hold it, is about 8 to 12 seconds. Your anaerobic glycolysis system, or your lactic acid system, there's no required presence of oxygen. Limited in regard to energy supply, up to 3 minutes depending on how trained, and your lactate threshold. So if any of you guys have ran track or have seen somebody running track, and you look at the 400 or the 800 meters and you see their, a common term is the booty lock. You see their hamstrings, their glutes and stuff lock up. That is the onset of lactic acid. So again, this is not necessarily 100% effort, but it's still pretty high effort, 70, 80, 90% effort in the activity. And with that, you can sustain it for up to 3 minutes, depending on how you're trained, and again, what your lactate threshold is. And then lastly, we have our aerobic energy system, which requires the intake of oxygen, cannot supply the body with rapid explosive energy, but has an almost unlimited capacity to produce ATP, which is greater than 3 minutes in this case. So when we look at aerobic, think about cardio. You're running a mile, 2 miles, you're looking at 10 minutes, 20 minutes, depending on how fast you're running. You even look at those marathoners, 26 point something, 26.2 miles, and even your elite athletes, it's, over 3 hours to run that particular marathon. So the aerobic energy system is supplying oxygen to your blood for over 3 hours. Well, even go further. There's people that do ultra marathons, 50-mile runs, 100-mile, 24-hour runs, etc. And that just goes to show you that as long as you're intaking oxygen, your body can pretty much utilize it. So almost there's an endless supply. So when we look at utilizing our aerobic energy system, we're talking about less intense activities. Obviously, we took a look at the ATP PC system, and we talk about running a 100-meter dash as fast as you can, but you're only going to be able to run as fast as you can for 8, 9, 10, up to 12 seconds. When we look at the aerobic energy system, we're looking at what you can do for 5, 10, 20, 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, 10 hours, whatever it may be. And that's what the aerobic energy system is. So obviously the activity is less intense, but you can sustain it for a much longer period of time. Most activities combine anaerobic and aerobic systems. So there usually is a combination. You look at something, let's say basketball. Okay, we're going to talk about basketball. Well, let's say you have a fast break in basketball. You get a rebound and you're hustling down the court as fast as you can as you change possession. Well, that is going to use some of your ATP system. That may use some of the lactic acid system. But at the same time, you're going to slow down. But that game continues and your heart rate stays elevated, and you might play for 5, 10, 15 minutes at a time, so you're also utilizing your aerobic energy system. So just that's an example with basketball, how you'll utilize each of those different energy systems within the same activity. So again, most activities will combine both the anaerobic and aerobic system within the same activity itself. So let me get these pulled up here, and then we'll follow along. Okay, so maximum oxygen consumption, your VO2 max. VO2 max is one of the best measures of cardiorespiratory endurance or aerobic fitness. So this is a particular number that is associated with your aerobic or your level of aerobic fitness. It'll tell you how physically fit you are from a cardiorespiratory standpoint. It represents the full capacity or limit of one's cardiovascular system for transporting and utilizing oxygen. The higher your VO2 max, the more you can delay fatigue, oxygen debt, and continue activity. And obviously this means you're more fit. So this means the higher your VO2 max, the harder you can partake in an activity, the higher the effort is, and the longer you can delay fatigue. So the longer you're able to sustain that activity. So the faster or the harder you're able to do it and for a longer period of time obviously means you're going to have a higher VO2 max, and that indicates that you are more physically fit, particularly from a cardiorespiratory standpoint. You can recover from oxygen debt more quickly. So at the same time, not only can you utilize oxygen for a longer period of time and your body runs from it, you can also recover faster. So let's say two people were going to go out there and run a mile or 2 miles. The person who is more physically fit with a higher VO2 max is going to catch their breath more quickly. They're going to recover, and they would be ready for another exercise bout shortly afterwards, where somebody who is not as physically fit, who has a lower VO2 max, would run that same mile, and they would be, for example, out of breath for a longer period of time. It takes their body longer to recover from that. And it can be measured in a lab or a field test. So some examples of a lab test are on a treadmill or a stationary bike. Those are the most accurate. I'll pull up a picture here. So here's an example of somebody testing their VO2 max. So this is obviously in a laboratory setting. You can see it's a treadmill. They're measuring oxygen. You can see them breathing in and out. He's got a heart rate monitor on there. They're measuring a heart rate, and they're doing a couple other things. When you measure your VO2 max in a human performance lab such as this, you complete this test until exhaustion. And when I mean exhaustion, it means where you cannot physically run anymore. So basically what they do is there's a standard protocol where the treadmill starts out, and then every few minutes it's going to increase in speed and increase in elevation. So it's going to become steeper. So you're going to be running on a higher incline and at a faster pace every few minutes. Well, sooner or later, your body is not going to be able to keep up with the speed of the treadmill or the incline of the treadmill. And at that point, when your body physically becomes exhausted, the test would be over. They would measure the different components from your oxygen consumption to your heart rate and be able to give you a VO2 max number. That's the most accurate way to do it. However, not everybody's going to have access to a human performance lab like we see here. So if you look in your textbook, there are some sub-maximal tests which are much more feasible, but there are 3 examples, I think, in the back of Chapter 2. You have the Cooper's 12-minute walk-run test, you have a 1 mile walk test, and a 1.5 mile run-walk test. And these predict submaximal VO2 max. But it is going to give you a rough idea. Now, with these examples in the back of Chapter 2, these are things that anybody can do utilizing usually a stopwatch and a particular distance. So obviously you would have to know, if it's going to be a 1 mile walk test, you need to know how far a mile is. So whether you're doing it on a track or a pre-measured distance that you know what is 1 mile. But other than that, anybody can perform those submaximal tests. So they're more feasible, and that's why it's probably more applicable for you to perform one of those, because not everybody's going to have access to that human performance lab to do that. So again, you can utilize the submax test and get a rough estimate of your VO2 max, which again will tell you where you stand in terms of your cardiorespiratory endurance. Excuse me. Psychological benefits of your cardiorespiratory endurance. Let's pull these out and we'll run through them. So the first one, greater cardiac output. We talked about that. More blood faster. So with cardiac output, your stroke volume increases. You're pushing more blood per beat of your heart. And because it's going more blood per beat, you're receiving that oxygenated blood faster and quicker, and your heart's not having to beat as many times to produce that amount of blood for you, or that amount of oxygen for you. It benefit is longevity. Obviously being able to perform activities for a longer period of time. Simply put, because your body can utilize the oxygen better. Improved VO2 max, so you're producing more ATP, again, which is the molecule of energy. Lowered blood pressure, if high prior to chronic exercise. So it will lower your blood pressure, both chronic and short term for that period of time. Reduced body fat content. So again, we've talked about how cardiorespiratory endurance can have a positive impact on your other health-related components, and we used the example earlier in this chapter about it reducing your body fat percentage or your body fat content. It increases metabolism and remains elevated after exercise. So this is one of the ways that it reduces your body fat content is it increases your metabolism, so your body is burning more calories during the workout, after the workout, even for an extended period of time after that workout. Your metabolism is going to stay increased, so it's going to be, your body's going to be burning more calories. It increases your HDL cholesterol and lowers your LDL cholesterol. It is important to know these are two different types of cholesterol. I know when we talk about cholesterol, most people are associating it with the bad type of cholesterol, which is your LDL, your low density lipoproteins. But HDL is actually a good type of cholesterol and can do your body a lot of good things, and that's high density lipoprotein. So having cardiorespiratory endurance will actually help you increase the good type of cholesterol, which is HDL, and helps you lower the bad type of cholesterol, which is LDL. Lower your resting heart rate. Again, so your heart is beating less. It's not having to work as hard to supply your body with the oxygenated blood that it needs, and also remove that deoxygenated blood. So you're doing your heart a favor. You're letting it run more effectively and efficiently. It's still supplying the blood that it needs with the oxygen, but it's having to work less hard to do that. And then less bone mineral loss. So when we start looking at osteoporosis and things like that, most of your cardiorespiratory endurance is, walking, running, cycling, different activities like that. And those weight-bearing exercises help with your bone mineral loss. So you can help maintain the mass and the density of your bones as you progress through there. Oh, I'm sorry. So as we talk about acute and chronic changes with aerobic exercise, acute means immediate. It happens immediately as you begin and as soon as you finish exercise, and then that's it. And then it returns back to normal. So increased metabolism, again, you're going to be burning more calories. Increase in your cardiac output. Your systolic pressure is going to increase. Ventilation, which is your respiratory rate, so you're going to be breathing faster, breathing harder. Just think about anything. As soon as you start running, as soon as you start exercising, your breathing increases. So that's going to happen as an acute change. Muscle hypertrophy resulting in the slowing of digestion. So your muscles are going to break down, which happens during exercise. And all of those are going to return to normal quickly after that particular exercise ends. Chronic is more of a long-term lasting effect. So this is also going to be able to increase your metabolism because you're increasing your lean muscle mass and decreasing your fat mass. It's going to provide you with a lower resting heart rate. So again, on your normal daily basis, day-to-day activities, your heart rate is not going to have to beat as fast to produce the amount of oxygenated blood and remove the deoxygenated blood that your body needs. It's going to increase the stroke volume. So the reason it's able to lower its resting heart rate is because it increases stroke volume and can push more blood per beat. Increases cellular activity, increased capillarization of muscle, improved oxygen utilization and muscle glycogen. And these are chronic effects. So these will last long after the workout is over. And again, too, one thing I do want to cover here, a couple of other things that we can add. But you also must continue this. So we talked about here at the bottom, right here, it talks about maintaining over a lifespan or changes will revert back. So even though we talk about it being a chronic change, which lasts for an extended period of time, if you were to exercise for 5, 10, 15 years and then stop, at some point, those are going to revert back to your original state before you started working out. So just a couple of things. You need to be able to, you have to use it or you will lose it. And a little general rule of thumb here is you lose it in about half the time it took to gain. So for example, let's say you worked out for 1 year and you increased all of these, the metabolism, the lower resting heart rate, increased stroke volume, etc., for 1 year. And then if you were to stop working out after that 1 year mark, it would take you about half the time to lose that and go back to what it was before you ever even started working out. So if it took you a year to gain it, it will take you 6 months to lose it back to its original levels. So again, it shows you why you need to be able to continue to sustain exercise and activity over a lifespan, not just for short periods of time here and there. Components of aerobic exercise. So the mode indicates the type of exercise you're going to perform. Now, I want to suggest to you find something that's fun. A lot of times when we talk about aerobic exercise or cardio, people think, well, I got to get on the treadmill or the stair stepper or the elliptical or whatever it is, and that could not be further from the truth. All you have to do is find an activity that allows you to increase your heart rate for an extended period of time. You can play ultimate frisbee. You can play basketball. If you guys have not played a 3-on-3 full court basketball game, it is absolutely exhausting. So the mode just indicates the type of exercise performed. And again, that can be anything that keeps your heart rate elevated for a long period of time. Find something that's fun. Find something that you enjoy doing because you're much more likely to sustain that activity over the long term. Should involve large muscle groups. So again, when you're doing some type of aerobic exercise, you're usually utilizing your large muscle groups, your legs, everything that's involved in that, your glutes, your core, your back, the stabilization muscles. When you're swimming, if you guys have never swam before and you jump in a pool and you start swimming laps, you are going to find out there's muscles that you never even knew you had because it's involving all the different muscle groups. So the alternate to this, if you were to lift weights and you were focusing, say, strictly on a bicep exercise, well, all you're doing during that exercise is focusing on one muscle group. Where when we look at the components of aerobic exercise, usually the activities that we do to perform aerobic exercise involve our large muscle groups or more of our muscle groups. We're not necessarily narrowing it down to just one. They're usually rhythmic in nature. So again, you can think of a swimming stroke. It goes one after the other. Or running, you do one step in front of the other. It's rhythmic. Cycling, your pedals are going in a rhythmic motion. So most of them are rhythmic in nature, and they preferably include weight-bearing modes. So again, that's kind of being on your feet. So again, running, cycling, you have pressure against the pedals, and then you can look at everything from basketball to racquetball to flag football to ultimate frisbee to soccer. All of those, you're bearing your own weight, and that's what weight bearing means, is you're bearing the weight of your body, which helps prevent osteoporosis. One of the only activities I can think of that's an aerobic exercise where you do not bear weight is probably swimming. So swimming provides a lot of fantastic health benefits, but one that it does not provide is weight bearing. So if you were a swimmer or partaken in a lot of swimming activities, you just want to make sure that you're also implementing some type of weight bearing activity to help prevent the osteoporosis stuff. As far as frequency is how often you are doing it. So again, mode is what type of exercise, frequency is how often. So we look at daily cumulative 30 minutes of being active. That's kind of the goal, is to be active for at least 30 minutes a day. Simple is move more, sit less. Doesn't necessarily have to be aerobic activity, but just moving. And then engage in purposeful aerobic activity 3 to 5 days a week. So even if you're just moving more, sitting less on a daily basis, you still want to make sure that you are scheduling 3 to 5 days of your week for some type of scheduled aerobic exercise. So again, you can get this when we talk about move more, sit less. You can take the stairs instead of the elevator. When you go to the grocery store, park at the end of the parking lot and walk. These are just some simple ways in your day-to-day activity where you can move more and sit less, and also help increase some of your aerobic or your cardiorespiratory endurance. When we look at intensity, intensity is how hard. So again, we looked at the mode, which is the type of activity you're going to do. Frequency is how often you're going to do it. And intensity is how hard the activity is. Optimal range talks about 60 to 95% of your maximum heart rate. So it does give you a range in there. Again, when we determined our maximum heart rate, that's 220 minus our age. So whatever that number is, again, if you were 20 years old, then 220 minus your age of 20 would give you a maximum heart rate of 200. So what you're going to do is try to find a range between 60 and 95%. I know that's a wide range, but we'll kind of narrow it down of where you want your activity to be, where you want your heart rate to be during your aerobic activity to perform the desired results. Most experts suggest between 70 to 90% of your maximum heart rate. Again, it depends on goals and individuals' current health status. The Carvonin formula, if you take 220 minus your age, you get that number. So we use the example of 200 minus your resting heart rate. Okay, the way that you get your resting heart rate is if you were to wake up in the morning and the very first thing you did before you started getting out of bed, before you went to the bathroom, you simply, while you're laying in bed, take your resting heart rate per minute. So you could actually take your resting heart rate for 1 whole minute. If you have a stopwatch or some type of watch where you can look at what the seconds are going through, but you can take your heart rate for 1 minute, and then that is how many beats per minute your resting heart rate is. The average is 72. The average resting heart rate is 72. So, excuse me. So anyway, you take 220 minus your age minus what your particular resting heart rate is. Whatever number you get up there, you would times that by your percent intensity range plus your resting heart rate again. So let's say you wanted to work out at, say, 70%. So again, you would take 220 minus your age for 200, and then let's see, let's say your resting heart rate was 200, and I'll actually, I'm going to escape out of this, and I will pull up the calculator here so you can kind of see how we would do this. Okay, so 220 minus your age is going to give you 200. Okay, and then we're going to subtract, say our resting heart rate is 70, right? So 220, or 200, I'm sorry, minus 70 is going to give us 130. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to times that by our intensity range. So say we want to do 70%. So we'll take 130 times 0.70 for 70. We get 91 plus our resting heart rate. So again, what was our resting heart rate that we utilized? Was 70. So we would add 70 to that. Oh, I'm sorry, I went the wrong way. So we had 91 plus 70 equals 161 beats per minute. So again, if we were 20 years old with a resting heart rate of 70 and we wanted to work out at 70% intensity range, we would need to have our heart rate have about 160 beats per minute. And that's the Carvonin formula. You can also look in your book. It kind of shows you through there and walks you through there So take that information, do it yourself. Look at 220 minus whatever your age is, get your resting heart rate, plug that information in so you can see what you're trying to do as you go through aerobic exercise. So I'll get back here. Okay, perceived exertion is how hard you feel like you're working out. So again, intensity talks about how hard your workout is. When you look at a percent of your maximum heart rate, that is pretty specific. But you can also look at perceived exertion. So you can basically look at a scale of 1 to 10, and that's the Borg scale of perceived exertion, which you can see there. But it is very subjective for measuring exercise intensity because two people that are very similar might go through the same workout, and one says that's the hardest workout I've ever done, that's a 10, and the other person says, oh, that wasn't so bad, it was a hard workout but it wasn't that hard, I'm going to rate it as a 6. So you can see there's a great variance there based on how that person perceives the workout to be. So it is very subjective, but again, it's where they estimate your exertion. Your rate of perceived exertion is what RPE stands for, rate of perceived exertion. And again, the Borg scale is something, and again, you're basically rating it on a scale of 1 to 10. So when we look at the duration now, is how long the exercise bout is. So again, recapping those last couple of components here, we looked at the mode, which is the type of activity, frequency, how often are you do it, 2 days a week, 3 days a week, 5 days a week. We looked at the intensity, which is how hard, and now we're looking at the duration, which is how long that particular exercise bout should be. So at training intensity should be between 20 and 60 minutes. So when we look at exercising long enough to receive the physical benefits that we're trying to achieve, you need to have some type of duration between 20 and 60 minutes. So at least 20 minutes and even into the range of 60. And those that are extremely fit or very physically fit, you may even go longer than 60 minutes. Best determined by the individual goals for cardiovascular improvement and time available. So when we start looking at training for an hour, some people may not have an hour to be able to dedicate in a day to training. So what can you do for 20 minutes? Higher intensity allows for shorter duration. The longer the duration, the lower the intensity. So if you were to do something for 20 minutes, you could obviously say running at a faster pace. Your intensity is higher, whereas you would not be able to run that fast for 60 minutes. So if you're going to do something for a longer duration, a longer amount of time, you would work out at a less intense level. So again, if we just use the example between 20 and 60 minutes, the higher intensity, you could run faster for 20 minutes. If you were going to go for 60 minutes, obviously you would have to run at a little bit slower pace to maintain that over 60 minutes. The components of a bout of cardio exercise. So you obviously want to start with a warm-up. This is where many things are overlooked. Many people overlook warm-up, and it is a critical component to exercise and being healthy. If you negate or neglect warm-ups, that's what leads to a lot of injury. So again, warm-up is going to be 5 to 10 minutes of light cardio followed by light stretching. So just some light movement to get your body flowing, to get your heart rate elevated, and do some light stretching to get your muscles ready to go, increase the range of motion for whatever activity you're about to participate in. The activity period, looking at the overload principle. What the overload principle is you have to do more than what your body has done before. You have to overload it in order to achieve that next level of fitness. So this is not something that you want to do fast. It's not something that you want to do without thinking it through. But basically what it would indicate is, let's say you're used to running a mile in 12 minutes. You would do that for a few days or a few weeks. Once your body adapts to it and you can comfortably run that 1 mile in 12 minutes, if you want to achieve the next level of fitness, you have to overload your body. So what you might do is, instead of running 1 mile in 12 minutes, you might run a mile and a half in 18 minutes. So you're running at the same pace, at that 12-minute mile pace, but instead of running 1 mile, you're now running a mile and a half. So that's how you were able to overload it to achieve your next level of fitness. Or if you're running 12-minute miles and you wanted to still run a 1 mile, you would run it in 10 minutes. So you would run it at a faster pace. And again, that is overloading your body. It's causing it to perform at a higher level, which would allow you to achieve that next level of fitness. Intensity is how hard. So again, we talked about rate of perceived exertion or your target heart rate. And then duration is how long you're going to run. Frequency is how often. And then you would do your cool down. So before you would do any type of cardio exercise, you would determine, hey, this is going to be my warm-up. This is how hard, this is how long, and this is how often I'm going to do it. And then obviously with each of those workout bouts, you do want to finish with a cool down, because the cool down is going to allow your body to return back to its normal state. It's going to help with recovering. So if you were to do another exercise bout in a day or 2 days, it's going to allow you to be able to be at a more optimal level and recover so you can perform for that next exercise bout. And the cool down basically consists of light cardio and stretching, so very similar to what you did for a warm-up. Some types or modes of aerobic exercise. Again, look at all the different examples, and the examples range even more than this. Basically, as creative as you can get is what you can do for aerobic exercise. So for high aerobic potential, so these are things that really stress the aerobic system, but aerobic dance and walking and cycling, cross-country skiing, not that we have much of that around here, hiking, jogging, rope jumping, rowing. So those are things that are obviously tax the aerobic system in a greater to a greater amount. Moderate aerobic potential is basketball, downhill skiing, handball, racquetball, soccer, squash. And the reason that you see that is because it's not necessarily a consistent, if you're playing racquetball or basketball, we even used that example with basketball earlier, you're going to have periods within the game where you have high aerobic, low aerobic, depending on, if there's a timeout, you're changing players, you're on a fast break, what's going on within the game. And then low aerobic potential is archery, baseball, bowling, football, golf, softball, volleyball, because those are more, anaerobic type stuff, quick, fast stuff. Football, one play may take 10 seconds where, yes, you're going full 100% all-out effort for 10 seconds, but then you might have 30-second recovery before the next play or 40-second recovery before the next play. So it's not necessarily that long, sustained activity to promote that aerobic fitness. So here's just examples, but again, the list could be as long as what your imagination will allow. So aerobic exercise plan considerations, some precautions obviously that you want to take into account. If you have any health precautions, any things like that. Safety, injury, anything like that. What do you need to be cautious about? What are the objectives? What are you trying to accomplish by implementing this aerobic exercise plan? Assess your current fitness level. You want to be very realistic of where you're at, because you want to be able to have a good starting point and then also be able to track your progress from there. So assess your current fitness level. If you are somebody who is already physically fit, you could probably start at a higher level. If you have never done any type of aerobic exercise before, you probably want to start off a lot easier and allow your body to adjust to it before progressing up. So again, you might just want to walk a mile. If you've never done anything before, hey, let's see if I can walk a mile. Once you understand and realize you can walk a mile, hey, let's do 1.5 miles. Okay, now that I can walk 1.5 miles, let me try to jog a mile. Things like that. Mode selection is, again, determining what type of exercise you're going to do. Something that you enjoy, something that you're going to see the health benefits from. Safety concerns, you want to take those into consideration. We live in Texas, so it can be very hot and humid. You might not want to partake in aerobic exercise at 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon in August on a sunny day, because you're going to be susceptible to heat stroke and a lot of those other types of things. So make sure you do have some safety concerns. If you're out there on the roads and you're running or you're cycling, make sure you're wearing bright clothes so people can see, those types of things. If you're, in a weight room, or not a weight room, but an exercise facility, you're going to use cardiovascular equipment. Make sure you know how to use the equipment so you don't get injured. You know what you're doing there. And then you want to stay motivated. So find what motivates you. One of the things is making sure you are participating, or the mode of activity is something that you enjoy doing. So again, if you hate getting on a treadmill, if you hate running, if you hate cycling, but you love basketball, well then by all means play basketball. If you love racquetball, by all means play racquetball. If you enjoy the activities that you're participating in, you're going to be more likely to stay motivated. Also, find a workout partner, a training partner, something like that. You can also track your progress is another way to stay motivated. So let's say you are doing some running and you run 1 mile in 10 minutes. track your progress and then go through and test again, and maybe in a month you're able to run 1 mile in 8 minutes and then 1 mile in 7 minutes. And that is motivation itself, because you're seeing how you're improving in these different fitness levels. So implementing a program, evaluate initial fitness level, which we've already talked about. You want to make sure that you are being honest in that. You don't want to start off too fast, too strong, too hard. So evaluate your initial fitness level before you start. Schedule exercise as part of your day. So look at your daily schedule, your daily routine, and factor in when you can best schedule that exercise. If you don't schedule it, the odds of it getting done are slim to none. So there's a lot of people that try to schedule their exercise in the morning. That's the way I am. If I do not do my exercise in the morning, it's not going to get done, just because of what happens throughout the day. I have 3 kids. I have a wife. We get home from work and the kids have activities. I got to do yard work, whatever it is. The next thing you know, you didn't get your exercise in that day. So I always schedule my exercise for the first thing in the morning before the kids get up, because that's the only way that I'm going to get it in. Find variety of modes. So find a couple of different activities you do that you enjoy, because again, if you only had one type of exercise, over time that could get boring. So find a variety of modes to keep you entertained, to keep you motivated. Keep in your target heart rate zone. You want to increase duration and frequency before intensity. So again, the duration is how long you're going, frequency is how often you're going, intensity is how hard you're going. So from a safety standpoint, before you increase how hard you're going, increase the duration. So again, we use an example. If you are running a mile in 12 minutes, before you increase the intensity, let's increase the duration. So instead of running a mile in 12 minutes, let's run a mile and a half in 18 minutes. So the intensity is staying the same. We're still running 12-minute mile pace, but we've increased the duration of how long we're going to do it. And the same thing as far as frequency. If you're currently doing it 3 days a week, you would increase the frequency and say, okay, I'm going to go 4 days a week before you would increase the intensity. Progression recommendations during the initial phase: an increase in duration per session of 5 to 10 minutes every 1 to 2 weeks over the first 4 to 6 weeks. So I know that's kind of a mouthful, but you're looking at increasing 5 to 10 minutes every couple of weeks over the first month to month and a half. So you can see how it's a slow, steady progression, because you have to give your body time to adapt and adjust. And then beware of overtraining. Make sure you're giving your body ample time before workouts or before games or activities or whatever you're doing to let your body recover, because if not, that's when you can start seeing the negative effects of overtraining. You can get injured, you can get shin splints, muscle soreness, whatever it might be. And also from a psychological standpoint, you just get worn out mentally. So make sure you are cautious of the overtraining as well. As far as start between 500 to 2,000 calories per week. If you're looking at how many calories you expend, you want to try to start somewhere and expending 500 to 200 calories per week, which really in the grand scheme of things isn't a whole lot. But again, it does give you a starting point from that standpoint. You don't want to lose more than 2 pounds a week. So when we look at it from different weight loss type stuff, a lot of people, and you'll hear this on the TV or infomercials or whatever, I lost 10 pounds in 2 days, or I lost, 50 pounds over the last 2 months. Well, they've probably done it in an unhealthy manner, and the odds are they're probably going to gain it back. So from a healthy standpoint, you don't want to lose more than 2 pounds per week. So if your goal was to lose 10 pounds, you're looking at about 20 weeks worth of work if you do it from a healthy standpoint and a safe standpoint. So again, there's no quick fixes. Again, this is long-term health, long-term fitness. And to give you an idea, about 3,500 calories does equal 1 pound. So again, if you were going to try to lose 2 pounds over a week's time, you would need to expend about 7,000 calories to lose 2 pounds, just to kind of give you an example there. Benefit to risk ratio. Health risk: make sure you're consulting a physician, particularly if you have a pre-existing disease. Let me go back here. Sudden illness, hidden heart problems. So if you start an exercise program and all of a sudden you have some type of sudden illness, something doesn't feel right, there could be some issues there. Stop exercising and contact a doctor if any of these things, if you have pain in the chest, under the sternum, or radiating from the arm. Also, any other unexplained pain. If you've never experienced that pain before, something could be wrong. Make sure you contact a doctor. Irregular pulse rate, so your heart flutters or rapidly changes. Palpitations in the chest or the throat, dizziness, lightheadedness, confusion, or fainting. So here at the bottom, anything out of the ordinary, even if you are in shape. You've seen this even with some of these elite level athletes that may have a pre-existing heart condition or something like that they're unaware of. So any type of pain or discomfort, anything out of the ordinary, make sure you are consulting a doctor to make sure you are safe and make sure everything's okay. Other health conditions, as we're wrapping it up here, muscle soreness and injuries. Delayed onset muscle soreness is normal 24 to 48 hours later. So particularly if you're starting an exercise program for the first time, or maybe you've been doing an exercise program and you're going to start a new exercise program or change things. Anytime you're taking on that new stress, it takes your body a little while to adapt. So obviously your muscles are going to be sore. So it is normal for them to be sore 24 to 48 hours after your particular exercise. So sometimes if you start a new workout type program, the next day you're sore, but 2 days after you're even more sore because of the delayed onset muscle soreness. However, if it persists into 3 or 4 or 5 days, then you have most likely worked too hard too soon, and it also might indicate some type of injury. So a musculoskeletal injury, a pulled muscle, a sprained ankle, something along those lines. The best way you can try to overcome that is RICE, which is R for rest, I for ice, C for compression, E for elevation. So rest it, ice it, compress it, and elevate it. Most exercise injuries are caused by a poor warm-up, which we've already talked about. You're not preparing your body for the activity it's about to partake in, so a lot of times that can lead to injury. Poor mechanics, so you're not performing the activity correctly. Maybe poor equipment, or increasing intensity or duration too quickly, and your body's not quite ready to handle it, and it can cause injury from that standpoint as well. Looking at preventing injuries, the last 2 slides here, make sure you are warming up thoroughly, just like we've already talked about. And again, many people want to eliminate the warm-up, but it is critical. Make sure you're doing a good warm-up. Gradual progression, again, start off small, start off easy, and progress slowly and steady. Okay, there's no need to do anything too crazy too soon. Listen to your body. Again, if there's soreness, rice, ibuprofen, things like that can help. Avoid poor mechanical situations. So running in one direction, running on slanted roads or downhill, poor shoes, avoid hard surfaces. You can also substitute with lower impact exercises. So instead of running, you can do the elliptical, which is less pounding, less stress, or a stationary bike, swimming, walking, things like that if any of that persists. So when we talk about running in one direction, if you guys are familiar with campus and the indoor track and the rec center, you'll notice that every other day the direction of people running changes. The reason, if you were to run and turn to your right every time, every day, over and over again, your body would become imbalanced, which is a poor biomechanical situation, and can lead to imbalances within your body, which cause injuries. That's why one day you run and turn to your right, the other day you run and turn to your left, to help balance that out and provide a favorable biomechanical situation. Same thing if you're running on the roads, you don't really realize it, but roads are slanted for the water to drain off. So if you're always running on the same side of the road, whether you realize it or not, you're actually running on a slightly slanted surface, and unless you change directions or do something different, doing that over a long period of time can cause imbalance within your ankles, your feet, your knees, your hips, and could lead to some poor biomechanical situations. So make sure you are paying attention to that. Talking about poor shoes, just like tires on your vehicle, you need to make sure that you have good shoes, well-fitted shoes, and make sure that you change them every 3 months or so to make sure you're protecting your feet and your ankles, your knees, your hips, everything else from that standpoint. And the last one, because we do live in a hot, humid climate, looking at heat illness, okay? So this is something that we certainly don't want to play around with, particularly in those hot summer months where it's very hot and humid. But check temperature and humidity. Again, you don't want to go out there and try to do some aerobic exercise at 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon because it's going to be very hot and very humid during that time. So adjust duration and intensity. So if you do have to go out at that time, adjust the duration. So usually if you're running for, say, 30 minutes, maybe only run for 20 minutes. And then also adjust the intensity. So if you're going to go out there and run at, say, 10-minute mile pace, maybe slow it down and only run at 12-minute mile pace so your body can handle that heat and humidity. If possible, try to exercise during the cool times in the shade and also wear loose clothing. That'll help keep you cooler. So try to exercise in the early mornings and the late evenings or find some shaded areas because it's going to have a lower heat, a lower temperature, which will help you out. Drink water before, during, and after exercise. The big one is drinking water before. Most people wait until, oh, I'm about to go exercise, let me start drinking water. At that point, it's too late. So make sure you're drinking water before, obviously during, and then after, because you need to replenish that water that you've lost. Replenish the electrolytes, your salts and potassium that you lose during sweating. Sedentary, overweight, or older at greater risks for the heat illness. So make sure if you fall into one of those categories, you take a little bit extra precaution. And then acclimatize. So it takes your body time to adjust to different temperatures. So if you were to go to a different climate, make sure your body adjusts to that temperature, that climate before you necessarily partake in those types of activities. So that covers chapter 2. Again, always, if you have questions, please feel free to email me. And if not, we'll move on to chapter 3 next.